Hi there, it's Rachel Gregg and welcome to my YouTube channel. In this video I'm going to share with you an art journal process video in my Dina Wakley Media Blue Journal. So I'm using one of the watercolour pages. So the pages in this journal, the watercolour pages in this journal are a heavy weight. So they're a little bit heavier than what you'll see in the regular black covered journal from Dina Wakley. So it just means that it can really take some of this wet media really well. And I'm starting out by creating a little background here using the gloss sprays. So that first colour I used is the Sage gloss spray, and for that one I used the Cobblestone stencil, and the one that I'm using now, this stencil here, is called the Cubed stencil, and I was just spraying through some of the syrup gloss spray. And I had some left over then on the stencil, and rather than just wiping that off the stencil and then just wasting that gloss spray, instead what I'm doing is now putting it onto some sheet music. So that just means I'll then have some nice sheet music that I can rip up and tear up and use on my page. And I've also got some spare gloss spray or some wet gloss spray still on that Cobblestone stencil. So all I'm doing to actually make this go onto that sheet music is I just sprayed with a little bit of water, so that just reactivates that gloss spray to just make it a little bit more wet than what it was just as the gloss spray. So that was just a nice way to create some coloured sheet music that I can rip up and use for the background of the page. And what I'm doing now is I want to use or create some stamped images for the page, and I'm using Dina's Scribble sticks as an ink. So what you need to do there is I'm just dipping it in water. So you can see I've just got a mug there full of water and just dipping the Scribble stick into that water, which then activates that pigment and makes it like wet, like a watercolor, and then using that to scribble onto the stamp, which is basically inking the stamp and then stamping that onto some nice heavyweight cardstock. So I really like stamping with the Scribble sticks. It just creates a really nice soft watercolor effect. And for the first couple of little flower stems, I've just used the evergreen colour, and then for the next couple I've used the ancient colour. And the ancient Scribble stick is a metallic Scribble stick, so it'll have a really nice metallic shimmer to it when it dries. And for the last one here, I'm just mixing the colours a bit, so just going on with both colours, and then they'll blend together because they're both reacting with that water, and they'll blend together to create a really nice mixture of those two colours. And this is one of those things that you could do at any time just to build up some stamped images that you could use for your art journals. Scribble sticks work really well with a lot of different images. I like to use them with flowers and leaves. You can also use them for faces or anything that would still be recognizable even though it's kind of watery in effect. So just look at the stamps that you've got and just experiment and just see which ones work really well with the Scribble sticks. Now I'm using the Great Things Ahead stamp set, and this has got some really funky little people down there on this stamp set. So I just want to stamp some of these up using the Archival Jet Black ink pad. So I want these to stand out and be the focal point of the page. So that's why I'm using the black, just to make it a little bit more bolder than the other colors. And I'm just using some strips of white cardstock. I tend to save all these little leftover pieces basically and have them there just in my drawer just to use, and they're really good. Like obviously this stamp is the perfect size for these little strips, but you could use any kind of leftover cardstock for creating sentiments and doing all sorts of smaller stamping, which kind of means that you do end up saving a lot of strips like I do, and I just never end up throwing out any kind of spare pieces of cardstock because they can be used in this way. So these little sentiments I really like that from this stamp set. It's kind of like affirmations, just giving yourself a nice little boost. You're doing a beautiful job, you matter, I see you. So I'm just stamping these out, and then I'll just trim these out when I want to put it on the page. And again, if you've got any of these little leftover cardstock pieces or anything like that, you can stamp out plenty of these sentiments in advance, and again have like a little bowl or a little drawer or a little box just full of these stamped sentiments that you can use on any of your pages. Okay, so now I want to get on to the decorating. So that little sheet music, the one that I sprayed or put the stencils onto, has now dried, and so has my background. So I'm now going to start collaging some of this sheet music onto the background and build up the page. And I'm using gel medium. So this is the Dina Wakley gel medium, which works really well for thin pieces of paper, just like this sheet music. So just putting a bit on the back of that sheet music and just pressing that onto the page. You could also put it onto the page as well, so then you've got wet on wet. But I'm being a bit fast with this one and just putting it straight onto the sheet music and then straight onto the page. And it adheres just fine, just like that. So I'm just adding bits and pieces. So some of the page has got more bolder patterns onto it, and then other parts, like you can see the main part of that sheet music has that sage color. So the good thing about these stencils is because some are more bolder than others, and the colors, obviously, you can just mix and match how you put that sheet music on your page. So now I'm just going to stick on my 3 little people, and because the cardstock that I used is quite a heavy cardstock, it's like a 300 GSM, so it needs something a little bit more heavy duty in terms of the adhesive. So this time I'm using glossy accents, and the reason I love using glossy accents is it will stick basically anything down, and it'll definitely keep these heavy pieces of cardstock in place. So I'm just squeezing out a little bit. The glossy accents I'm using, this one here is just a little tiny bottle, but it also comes in a larger bottle, and it's just really a great adhesive to travel with and have on hand for whenever you're using a heavy piece of cardstock, basically like these ones. And the flowers, my little stamped flowers here, these are also on a heavier weight, so I'm also using glossy accents for that as well. I've trimmed out all of my little flowers, and I've got some that are full flowers, some that I've cut off some of the little leaves. That's what I like about this stamped image, is you can kind of mix and match it, like you can change it for however you'd like it to be. And this one here, I'm just going to let some of those flowers overhang, or those leaves overhang on the edge there, and then I want to create a little cluster down here on the left hand bottom side. And you can see now how those scribble stick colours blended together really nicely. So these little ones that I'm using, or some of the ones I'm using down here, have the multicolours that I was using, or the 2 colours, and how they blended in nicely. And then I'm also adding in some that were just using the evergreen scribble stick. And it just gives it a nice variation for down here on that bottom left side of the page. And I just really love how those colours blend together, and you've got that metallic there with the ancient scribble stick. Now I'm going to add in my little sentiments here, and I'm just going to trim out that quote just so it's individual, so it's not one big quote. So I've got it as 2 separate strips, and that's one of the good things you can do with sentiments as well. You can trim them, especially ones in a font like this. They're easily trimmed out, so you can use them as one strip or one full quote, or making them individual little words. So it just gives you more variety on what you can do for your pages. And again, just using that glossy accents just to stick those down. And I've still got some of these leaves, these little stamped leaves. So I'm just seeing where I want to hang some from the top. So therefore I'll have 3 little clusters. So what I'm doing on this page is kind of keeping everything in 3s. So I'm going to have 3 clusters of leaves. I've got my 3 people, and then I'm going to have 3 sentiments. It keeps that variation, and also keeps that triangular composition happening. So I'm just fussy cutting some of those leaves out and just sticking them underneath some of those sentiments using some of the glossy accents. So now that everything is stuck down, I just want to add a little bit more colour around the sentiments there, and I'll just use those scribble sticks again. So this is the ancient scribble stick, and you can see as I dip it in the water, you'll see some of the pigment, it kind of stays in the water. That's how the water's reacting with that pigment and making that pigment wet, and basically turning into a nice little watercolor effect around these sentiments. And it's kind of unpredictable, so depending on how much water you have on your scribble stick and how much pigment is wet on the tip of your scribble stick will also determine how much of that pigment will then go around your sentiment. So if I've got any excess of that pigment, I just remove it just by tapping a little cloth on there. I quite like the randomness about it, and how you might get like quite a lot of pigment in some areas and not so much in others. So now I'm just adding a few little rosy cheeks to my people, and as you can see, it goes on quite strong. But if you just tap it off with a cloth, and then I'm just using that excess that I had on the cloth just to add the little rosy cheeks to the other 2 people as well. I'm just adding a little bit more colour now. I just don't seem to think I can have enough colour around these sentiments. Just adding a little bit more of that evergreen. And I just love how splotchy it is and how random it is. So I'm just going in with the scribble stick and then just using my fingers just to blend it out a little bit more, adding some more ancient over the top and just building up that colour. And it seems that the more I do it, the more I keep wanting to add more and more and more. And that doesn't matter. It just adds more layers to your page. So here's my finished page. I hope you liked that little quick tutorial, and I hope it inspires you to get out your gloss sprays or your scribble sticks or your stamps or whatever it is you have in your stash and have a play in this journal. If you'd like to see other tutorials on what I've done in the Dina Wakley journal, check out my other tutorials on YouTube, and you can also see more over on my website at rachelgregg.com. Thanks so much for watching.